Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Against the Odds. So, this week, we were supposed to be playing Glorious End in Standard. That was a winning card on our all-Amonkhet poll, so I built a Glorious End deck. It was pretty spicy. It was like a Glorious End Super Friends list that was using Glorious End with Gideons to not die, and then we could use our extra turns to take up our Planeswalkers, and we could just do all kinds of sweet stuff. Eventually ultimate our Planeswalkers with the Glorious Ends. It was really spicy, and I really liked it. But after playing 2 matches with the deck, I realized that Glorious End is bugged on Moto. It should, once you cast it, it should trigger 1 time at your end step. So if you fizzle that trigger with a Gideon emblem, for example, you don't have to worry about that Glorious End trigger again. But what it's doing is triggering every end step after you cast it. So even if you survive a turn or 2 with a Gideon out and the Gideon emblem, if you ever end your turn without a Gideon on the battlefield, you lose the game, because it just keeps triggering over and over and over again, and that's not how it's supposed to work. So because of that, that defeated basically the entire idea of the deck, and it also defeated all the other tricks you can do with Glorious End. It's just going to keep triggering, so you Angel's Grace, it's going to trigger again. Anyway, long story short, we had to switch gears at the last minute, and I'm kind of excited because I really wanted to play this deck. This is New Perspectives combo. This is not a deck I built from scratch. This is one of the very rare instances on Against the Odds that we're playing a deck that's not 100% our own. This is a deck that's kind of been floating around under the radar, and New Perspectives has been on our Against the Odds poll. It's one of the cards I really wanted to play, and this seems like a super sweet way of attacking it, and almost the only way of trying to combo with it in Standard. So that's what we're playing this week. Hopefully Glorious End gets fixed in the future and we can slide it back into the rotation, because I really want to play Glorious End. I think there's some sweet stuff we can do with it, so hopefully it gets fixed. Anyway, let's talk New Perspectives combo in Amonkhet Standard. So we're built around New Perspectives, and this card is super sweet. It's sort of the new Fluctuator, in some ways an upgraded Fluctuator. Basically, it's a lot of mana, 6 mana, but it draws us 3 cards, which makes sure we have 7 cards in hand, and then as long as we have 7 cards in hand, we get to pay 0 instead of our cycling costs. And this is super important. Fluctuator just reduced the generic mana cost of cycling by 2. So if your thing cycled for 2 generic mana, you could cycle for free, but if you had colored mana costs, if your thing cost 4 mana to cycle, let's say, you couldn't cycle it for free. New Perspectives, it doesn't care. No matter what the cycling cost is, 4 mana, colored mana, whatever, you get to cycle for free. So the plan of this deck is we get to our New Perspectives with the help of a bit of ramp in Sheffit Monitor in Weirding Wood. These cards get the New Perspectives out on turn 5. That's kind of our goal, is to cast a New Perspectives on turn 5, and then once we cast New Perspectives, we just win the game. The game ends. It takes a while. There's a lot of cycling involved. We'll go through the combo, but that's the plan of the deck. So Sheffit Monitor and Weirding Wood, we'll talk about them again as we go along, but they're mostly to ramp us into our New Perspectives a little bit earlier. Sheffit Monitor also works very well after New Perspectives because it gets the land untapped. So after we tap out on turn 5 or 6, all of our lands are tapped. It's basically +1 mana when we cycle it. Weirding Wood also gains us some mana as we go through the combo, but plan number 1, get down a New Perspectives as quick as possible. Like I said, hopefully turn 5, definitely turn 6, and then we do some cycling. So Haze of Pollen, Renewed Faith, and Cast Out, they're just cycling cards. That's primarily what we're going to do with them. They are also Keep Us Alive cards, so one of the scary things with this deck is fast aggro. We can win on turn 5, win on turn 6 super consistently, but if we're dead on turn 4, or on turn 5 if we have a turn 6 draw, it doesn't really matter. So these cards just do a little bit to help us stay alive. In the early game, we can fog our opponent for a turn with Haze, we can gain a couple life, or even 6 life with Renewed Faith, we can cast out to get rid of something, but a high percentage of the time we're just cycling these. And part of the reason our deck's so consistent is we're cycling through our deck on the early turns, which helps make sure we have our New Perspectives on time and everything else that we need. We also have a ton of cycling cycling lands, a massive 13, and these cards in the early game, they're land, they're just a kind of annoying tapped land drop. In the late game, they're an essential part of our combo. So how does this combo actually work? And basically, once we get down our new perspectives and we can cycle for free, our main goal is to get all 4 Vizier of Tumbling Sands out of our deck. So Vizier of Tumbling Sands is our primary way of making mana after we're tapped out. We have 4 Traverse the Uvenwalds almost every single time. Once we have the combo, we are searching out Viziers with them. In the early game, we can get an untapped land, which can be important because we have so many tap lands. But basically, we get all 4 Viziers, and we need 1 Weirding Wood. So Weirding Wood ramps us into new perspectives, also makes it so one of our lands taps for 2 mana. And then our plan is to cycle our Vizier for free, and not only is Vizier drawing us a new card when it cycles, it's also gaining us 2 mana because we can untap the land with Weirding Wood. So if we cycle all 4 of our Viziers, we're gaining 8 mana. And then the trick here is we get them all back. So we can do this up to 4 times with Shadow of the Grave. We not only get back our Viziers, in every Shadow of the Grave it costs us 2 mana, but gains us 8 mana, so we're plus 6 mana in the process. It's getting back everything else we cycled that turn. Our cycling lands, our cast outs, our renewed face so we gain more life, our Sheffet monitors so we can get more lands. Anything we cycled comes back to our hand. So what we want to do is untap that land, get a bunch of mana floating, get back all of our cycling cards, but primarily our Viziers, so we can tap and untap that land again, cast another Shadow of the Grave. If we don't have a Shadow of the Grave, we just keep cycling until we find one, tap and untap that land again. The end result of this is we're going to have a ton of mana floating. We can go from being tapped out on turn 5, no lands untapped, no mana, looks like we're in really rough shape, to having 6, 12, 18, up to 24 mana produced thanks to our 4 Shadow of the Graves, assuming we can find all of our Viziers beforehand. And then, for finishing the game, we have a single approach of the Second Sons. So we just talked about how we can gain 24 mana by cycling through our entire deck and continually tapping and tapping that land with a Weirding Wood, with our Vizier. So the end result of this is we draw our entire deck, and as we draw our entire deck, we're going to find our 1 approach of the Second Sons. And since we have all that mana floating, we cast our approach of the Second Sons. It goes back in our library 7 cards deep. Normally you'd be like, oh, we gotta wait a few turns, is this gonna work out? But since we have a new perspectives, we just keep cycling. We cycle our cycling lands, our Viziers again, whatever we gotta do. That'll get us those 7 cards deep, draw the approach of the Second Sons, cast it again, win the game on the spot. If we're worried about disruption, about counters, we can have enough mana, if things go right, that we can also draw our 1 Sphinx of the Final Word, cast it, and then use that to protect our approach of the Second Sons from counter spells. Sphinx is also a backup finisher if something goes horribly wrong and our approach is somehow in our hand and it gets hit by discard before we can cast it. We can use Sphinx as a backup way to win the game, but that's the plan of the deck. So just to reset this, we go from tapping out, no untap lands, to cast a new perspectives either on turn 5 or turn 6, and then the end result of this is we draw our entire deck, we produce 20-some mana from that state of being completely tapped out, and just win the game that turn before letting our opponent untap. That is the idea. That's the plan of the deck. That's what we're going for. So we'll see. As far as the mana base, we already mentioned the cycling land, super important, a couple of fortified village, and a bunch of basic lands that we can search out with our Traverse in the early game, search out with our Sheffet Monitor as we're comboing off. The sideboard does a few different things. First, we have counter spells. One of the ways the deck can lose is our opponent counters our new perspectives. So if we're playing against a controlling deck, we bring in Negates, we bring in Dispel, we cycle until we find not only new perspectives, but also counter backup, 2 counter backup if we need to, since it's a control deck. We have enough time that they're not going to kill us super quickly. And then we cast our new perspectives, counter our opponent's counters if need be, and then we win the game. We also have an aggro plan, which is Radiant Flames and a Mountain. Mountain's important because while we do have some dual lands that have red mana, we want to be able to search up the mountain with Sheffet Monitor, with Traverse the Uvenwald. So if we're playing against Mardu vehicles, red-black aggro, things like that, we bring in the Radiant Flames. Hopefully this buys us enough time if we wipe our opponent's board that we can get to turn 5, combo off, win the game. The final part of the sideboard is backup finishers. So we talked about control, we talked about aggro. The other way this deck can get beat is stuff like Pick the Brain, Lost Legacy, and a lot of people are playing those cards. If you're playing black, you almost certainly have those in your sideboard. So our opponent's plan will be to cast a Lost Legacy on New Perspectives to shut down our combo kill. And then it's super hard for us to win with our main deck. So if we think our opponent's going to be bringing in those cards, we can bring in Drakehaven, go on the natural cycling kill, bring in a Kefnet, a big, hard to deal with flyer, and bring in an Angel of Sanctions, which can get rid of any annoying permanent our opponent has, plus it gives us the ability to beat down in the air. So if we're playing black, diversify our threats a little bit and make sure we can win. And that is New Perspectives Wombo combo for Amonkhet Standard, and that's our Against the Odds deck for this week. So how is this deck going to work? And I have no idea. On paper, it looks pretty janky. I mean, the idea is solid. I can see the steps to making this deck do really crazy things, but oh man, it seems a little slow. We got a ton of tap lands. How often do we fizzle once we start comboing off? How often do we die before we even get to New Perspectives? So there's some questions here, so we'll have to wait and see, but I'm hopeful that at least sooner or later, we'll get the right draw, we'll play our New Perspectives, and just win the game on the spot. So we'll have to see how it goes. I'm super excited to give it a try, though, because this has got to be one of the most unique decks that we've had in Standard in years and years. It is just so different, so unique. It feels, I don't even know, Cycling Storm? It's just so different than anything we have in Standard. Such a crazy combo, but we're going to give it a shot, see what happens. Anyway, that's been our deck tech for New Perspectives in Amonkhet Standard. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the gameplay videos, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you haven't already, take a minute and click that subscribe button. It's a great way to support the channel for free, and you'll find the next video in the playlist right here.